Hey everyone, I'm Courtney Baker, the CMO here at Knownwell. I'm going to give everybody a minute to get in here. We are really excited to welcome you to today's session, Building a Revenue Engine Beyond the Sale. I mean, honestly, it's what we all want. David, right? I haven't even introduced you. I'm already throwing questions at you.
Everybody wants a revenue engine.
That's right. We all do. By the way, speaking of questions, along the way, please feel free to enter them in the Zoom chat. David and I will be getting to as many of those as we have time for at the end. Actually, just before this webinar, David was just talking about someone saying his Q&A was better than his presentation. So I don't want to oversell it, David, but maybe you want to wait to
Thanks
the
a lot.
end, yeah, to be part of that Q&A. We'll also follow up with a recording. So take as many notes as you want to, but don't feel the pressure to jot down everything. We will be sending it out after this webinar. And at the end of this webinar, we'll also be doing something fun. David, do you have your Aura ring on?
I do. I
Okay.
do.
Great. So obviously, we are fans of the Aura Ring, and we're actually going to be giving one away to somebody on this webinar. So stick around for that, and we'll give you more details, and also to find out why in the world are they giving away an Aura Ring? There's actually a reason. But before we go any further, let me give you a quick overview of what to expect today. First, we're going to set the stage and show you why building a revenue engine beyond the sale can have an outsized impact on your business. It's incredible. We all get it, but when you see the numbers, you're going to be astonished, I think. We'll also give you a quick tale of two companies to see what their growth curves look like. If you're leading a firm at scale, you've likely noticed a frustrating paradox with post sales and rev ops. Your pre sales process is a high tech science field, pipeline stages for leads, contacts, opportunities, conversion rates on every stage. But your post sales world of delivery, retention, and expansion is often a high touch art form. And we'll cover why that is and assure you that you're not alone. Then we're going to show you how a new and different way to address this paradox. So you can actually build that revenue engine that continues to throttle well beyond the sale. At the end of the session, you'll also have several actionable strategies you can deploy in your organization to close that gap between the art of relationship and the science of growth. Before we go any deeper, let me give you a quick introduction to David DeWolf and me. David DeWolf is Knownwell's founder and CEO. He has a track record in scaling and transforming businesses. Prior to Knownwell, David spent 16 years as the driving force behind Three Pillar Global, a digital product development company. Under his leadership, Three Pillar grew year after year, earning a coveted spot on the Inc. 5000 list of America's fastest growing private companies 10 times. David twice led Three Pillar through successful private equity sales, showcasing his ability to navigate high stakes transitions while maintaining growth momentum. And I'm Courtney Baker. I'm the CMO here at Knownwell. I've been part of Knownwell from the very beginning in its launch in 2023. And I've gotten to help onboard and work alongside Knownwell users and our customers since we launched our platform. So hearing some of the most common pain points for B2B service leaders firsthand, a number of which we'll touch on in more detail today. In addition, I've lived firsthand the transition that pre-sales went through from the early 2000s to the data-driven machine it is today. And what we are talking about today is honestly a similar transformation that's needed for post-sales. David, enough about us. I have, by the way, no one has ever talked about my great Q&A, but hopefully I can hang with you today. But let's get into why we are here. Why is now such a critical time for service companies to figure out how to extend their pre-sales discipline into that full customer lifecycle.
Thanks, Courtney. Yeah, I'm happy to go into that, and I'm really thrilled to be here because when you're a B2B services firm doing hundreds of millions in annual revenue, the stakes for retention and expansion and growth aren't just high, they are nearly the entire game, even though we don't execute that way right now. Research has clearly shown that most firms in the space get about 80% of their annual revenue from existing accounts. Those are the high performing firms. And moreover, about 70% of their incremental growth every year comes from their existing account base. Yet, where do we spend an outsized amount of our leadership energy, our investment, our growth dollars? It's on the 20% that represents the new logo hunt. So let's be honest. There's a reason for that. Everybody loves the thrill of the chase and the sales team ringing the bell when the new contract is signed. Winning new business seems like a smart, reasonable path to growth. More clients means more revenue, and more revenue means more growth. And those clients mean more service area to find that revenue, right? Well, if you're relying on filling a leaky bucket with new logos, you're going to be in for a long, hard slog. If landing new logos is your primary growth driver, it's really difficult to grow your business predictably. And we're going to see that with the math. The gap between high performing companies and the competition is often not how good they are at winning new logos. It's how good they are at keeping and growing the clients they win in the first place. So let's go ahead and look at the math to showcase why understanding this gap and acting to close it is so vitally important. Hang with me here. Imagine that we're telling a tale of two different companies. Courtney, on one hand, we have a company that's doing 200 million in annual revenue. We'll call them RevOps Light, okay?
I like that. 200 million sounds good. I'll take that.
All right, you can have it.
Okay.
You're going to regret it, but you can have it, okay? On the other hand, we have a company that's a good bit smaller. They're doing 250 million in annual revenue. Let's call them RevOps Lifecycle. Now, both companies win new customers at the exact same rate of 15%. Here's where they differ. Company B, RevOps Lifecycle, that's the one I took that's smaller. Company B has cracked the code on both reducing churn and expanding their services within existing clients. They've become world-class at reducing churn in their existing client base, knocking it down to just 3% each year. You and I have both seen this math enough to know how long it will take for Company B to surpass Company A. For our audience, if you want to take a minute to come up with a guess, how long do you think it'll take our company called RevOps Lifecycle to make up this $50 million annual revenue gap? Think about it. Here's the harsh reality for RevOps Lite. It is under 3 years. RevOps Lifecycle will surpass them in about 2.5 years. Within 5 years, RevOps Lifecycle will have more than doubled in annual revenue. They'll have left RevOps Lite completely in the dust with $72 million more in annual revenue.
I changed my mind.
I told you you'd regret it. Just wait. The bad news is going to keep piling up. Just to reiterate, to drive this point home, these two firms win new business at the exact same rate. 5 years later, one is barely growing. The other has more than doubled. The difference between them isn't sales. It's operating discipline within their existing account portfolio, that existing client base. So, as we get into the meat of the webinar here, and as you think about how to apply these ideas in your business, I want you to ask yourself this question. Which company would you rather be? Which company is better positioned for the future? which company looks more attractive to acquirers or investors?
David, again, I mentioned this at the top, and I feel like this is something we intuitively know, but honestly, we rarely take the time to stop and look at the actual numbers. What really makes this jump off the page also is if you say, okay, what if RevOps lifecycle is actually worse at winning new clients and looking at those numbers?
Totally. Well, let's go to that videotape then, right? Same exact stats, except RevOps lifecycle isn't as good at attracting the new logos. It's hard to be great at both things. So, what if we actually swap the investment? We go the other way and say they're not as great as new business development. They only grow new logos at a rate of 10% per year, while RevOps Lite stays steady at 15%. So, they are one third less performant in that area. Let's fast forward 5 years and let's see where we land. I think you're going to like my choice better still. At the end of year 5, RevOps Lifecycle has still surpassed RevOps Lite. It took them a little under 4.5 years to do so. And instead of the roughly 2.5 years when they're winning new logos at the same rate. So if you're going to choose one in the long term, you've got to prioritize that existing account base. So, not to beat a dead horse, I know I've said it a few times, but once again, which company would you rather be? You'd rather be the company that is earning more revenue and growing substantially faster, even if you're not as good at that sexy thing of ringing the bell and winning new clients. So hopefully we've painted a pretty vivid picture here that the key to growth in B2B services is retention and expansion. That's how you drive predictable growth in a business. With some new logos added in to also help fuel the growth, of course we have to win new logos, but we don't have to outperform there. We have to outperform in the existing account base.
Yeah, and this feels like a shift from the growth at all cost era that we have been in. And so I think it's so helpful to spend a minute here just to reframe how we're thinking about this because it's kind of ingrained in us,
Totally.
especially those of us that have lived maybe over on the pre-sale side.
And I love the point of the at all costs because the data clearly shows not only it is this payoff in the long run, it's actually more profitable growth. It's more efficient growth to focus this way as well. So while we're talking about and focused on the top line and you win there, the reality is you win even bigger on the bottom line.
Yeah, so true. And yep, I totally take it back. Don't want company A. I traded back. You have it, company A. Okay, David, you've spent a lot of time helping businesses reach this kind of accelerated growth curve. You've also done a lot of customer research in the process of building Knownwell. What does the problem that RevOps Lite is facing look like in their business?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to explain it is this concept of pre-sales rigor versus post-sales guessing, right? In the pre-sale, we run things based on data, discipline, rigor, right? The highest performing sales organizations, right? Those go-to-market engines that everybody raves about, brings in the new chief revenue officer, the chief marketing officer. What do? They run it by the data. It's a science. It's a machine. Those are literally the words we use to describe it. In the post-sale world, there's none of that. We run things based on vibes, gut feel, what it feels like. That has to change if you want to become more like RevOps Lifecycle and less like RevOps Lite.
And David, I wonder if we should pause here to just say marking red, yellow, green on a spreadsheet, which is what we see overwhelmingly in services firms, that is the form of vibes because it is so hard. What you really see is that is usually a indication of relationship strength. And we'll talk
Yeah,
about why it's so much more than that.
100%. And Courtney, what's shocking about that, we have done extensive customer research, including over 600 personal interviews with B2B services companies. over 90% of them still use red, yellow, green on a spreadsheet, in order to track their client health and to drive execution. And we have found very few leaders, if any, that actually trust that data. Because not that they have bad people, not anything against the individuals, but it's all based on gut. And there's all sorts of bias and personal subjectivity baked into that. There's not objective measurement and signaling. And oftentimes you have different perspectives that conflict. There's all sorts of mess there that is really difficult. And even if you're using things like an NPS score or a CSAT score to complement that, those things aren't designed for operational scientific rigor of a machine. They're designed for brand pulses, right? And anecdotes that are 3 months or 6 months old don't give you the operational real-time data you need to run your client services the way you run your sales machine. Can you imagine if you were asking prospects how likely they were to buy and running your entire funnel off of that? Right? Makes no sense.
Yeah.
So, so, you know, let's think about the level of discipline you've built into your sales organization. It is a managed, predictable science. You don't just hope for revenue, you manage the system. You are looking at stage conversion rates to see where deals are stalling. You're measuring pipeline velocity to know how fast a lead becomes a contract. You have a weekly pipeline review where every opportunity is scrutinized. And if a deal hasn't moved in 14 days, the flag goes up, right? We have a science. You manage by weighted probabilities and hard data. You have win-loss analyses, forecast calls, and resource planning meetings. You've invested millions into your CRM systems, most likely, and sales enablement too, to ensure that your pre-sales operating system is airtight. But for most firms, the moment that that contract is signed, the scientific rigor walks out the door. The relationship moves from a system to a black box. We stop managing by data and start managing by intuition. Instead of stage conversions, we rely on subjective status reports, self-reporting, anecdotes. Instead of a pipeline review, we have check-ins where we ask, how are things going with the client? And the answer is almost always great or not so hot. And everybody has a different opinion. We treat the most valuable part of our business, the economic engine of our business, right? Remember, over 80% of in-year revenue for the top growing firms. This existing client base, we treat it as an art form that can't be measured. And managing by vibes is why we end up with that leaky bucket that we saw earlier. We've mastered the science of the chase, but we're still practicing the art of the relationship post-sale. So, where does that leave us? Usually with a lot of thrashing and moaning and growing and wondering why it's so hard to grow. We talk about things not being able to be measurable. We talk about not understanding really what's going on or why somebody churned, right? We're missing everything.
So what I hear you saying, David, is basically we end up as company A, RevOps Light, whether we like it or not.
Or even worse, 100%. And here's what you need to grapple with. The real reason why growing your existing clients feels like an art is because the truth about your clients is currently invisible. It's what we call the ghost in the revenue machine, right? Let's remember the old adage. We manage what we measure. In pre-sales, we have all of that structured data, the rigor, the process around it. But in the post-sale world, you shift over to managing relationships based on a gut feel because we feel like we're in the relationship business. We know the client. We just had dinner with them. And the things you need to measure and instrument are squishier. They're softer, right? This relationship thing. It's an art, right? They're buried in the tone of an email thread, the frequency of Slack messages, the sentiment of a meeting transcript, and the health of these multi-threaded relationships that you need up and down your client's organization to grow. And even in the broader context of how the company is performing, are they growing themselves? Is the work you're doing for them contributing to their growth? Mix all of that up together, and you often end up with some combination of one of these archetypes. There's the single-threaded giant, where your biggest account is one executive change away from a collapse. There's the quiet quitter, where a drop in communication velocity may be the only warning that you'll ever get. There's the legacy trap, where you're delivering perfectly on a strategy that the client has already abandoned, and they pigeonhole you into only doing that one thing. Finally, there's the echo chamber, where you're relying on an account manager's vibes rather than the client's actual holistic company-wide sentiment and feeling about how the relationship's going. These aren't just edge cases, and usually there's not just one of these happening at a time, but a combination of them all happening at the same time. If you could instrument your post-sales systems and processes to listen for these signals and do it according to what the research shows actually drives retention and growth, then you can drive the kind of best-in-class net revenue retention that will get you from company A to company B levels of growth.
Okay, David, I think you've done an incredible job helping set up the problem. Now, I would love for you to help us figure out where do we go from here? How should the audience be thinking about what they can do to extend that pre-sales discipline, that RevOps discipline into post-sale and account management?
Yeah. Well, Courtney, I come from a software engineering background, right? I started
Mhm.
my career in software engineering before I even got into business. And in software, there is this concept of shift left with testing. And what that means is you want to bring testing into the development process as early as humanly possible so you can catch bugs before they make it into production. The earlier we catch them, the cheaper they are to fix and the easier they are to fix, right? Well, research from IBM and others has found that roughly it's 100 times more costly to fix a bug later in the process when it's already in production than fixing it early in the design phase. What we're encouraging here today is very similar. And what we'll lay out in the framework we're about to present is we want the audience to shift right with their RevOps discipline. You do it exceptionally well early on, but how do we move it further in the client lifecycle? So that means taking some kind of rigorous approach, the same kind that we have in the sales world, and we want to use it to manage and measure client health, satisfaction, renewals, expansion, so that you can take that winning work, that DNA you have in sales, and you can apply it and get to first place. So,
David, can I jump in here and just give everybody a little encouragement? Because
yeah,
I want to remind everybody that your pre-sales operations didn't look the way it looks today 15 years ago.
so true. So
It
true.
was very similar to what we have today in post-sales. It was a lot of golf outings, having lunch with some, it was very much about the relationship. And obviously that has completely changed. So if you're sitting there right now thinking, oh gosh, yeah, this is a problem, and hopefully you do feel that. But I also want to give you a little glimmer of hope. Obviously, that has happened, that transformation has happened pre-sales, and it absolutely can happen for the post-sales function as well.
Courtney, that's so spot on. And if you think about how sales ops became rev ops, and now what we're saying is rev ops has to become commercial ops, right? It is about the continued scientification, right, of the entire commercial go-to-market machine. We started with sales ops, we integrated marketing into that, we had a holistic funnel for rev ops. Well, now we're saying it's got to include the entire commercial life cycle, right? So, such a good point. And there's hope because you're not alone. This is very, very common, right? So let's take a look at what we see as the component parts of an engine that drives revenue beyond the sale. right? Now we're moving from the why to the how. When we talk about shifting right and building a post-sales revenue engine for your organization, this isn't something that happens overnight. It's a maturity journey where each layer builds on the other. Level one, let's start here. This is what I call client operations. This is the visibility layer. This is the baseline. You've got to start here. It's an operating rhythm for account management and client services that surfaces risk and growth signals weekly, providing leadership with kind of a shared view of portfolio health so that they know where to focus and why, and they can drive execution and accountability against it. Level two, it's what I call commercial operations. This is the integration level where it starts to impact the health of the business. Let's remember something really important here, Courtney. A lot of times we look at these client relationships and we say, oh, that's a customer success thing. That's an account management thing. No, serving your client is a holistic company thing. The poor person that sits in that account management role, that customer success role, right? They're a facilitator of the entire organization, pulling them together. And so we have to take this operating discipline that we have in the atomic client organization that we've built in level one, and we've got to build it to be integrated into the entire organization. And this is where we break down silos and where RevOps becomes a team sport. It's integrating that client data into the operating cadence of the business into the rest of the organization. It's bringing finance, sales, and delivery into the same rhythm and making sure the knowledge that we have around our commercial accounts impacts our business forecasts, impacts how we deliver, how we sell, all of it comes together and is integrated with the same rigor and discipline, can influence everything that touches it. The final stage is commercial enablement, and this is the strategic layer. This is where we get to take advantage of that operating discipline that's taken us to the next level, but now we get to take it exponentially far. This is the pinnacle. Once you have the data and the integration, you can finally get strategic. You stop reacting to last week's fires and you start doing proactive planning against a disciplined operation.
You know, David, what I think is so important to note is that this gives names to a lot of things that frankly might otherwise just fall through the cracks.
Mm.
You know, in most firms, these three pillars are just part of everyone's job, which means they're no one's job.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if I kind of sit back as a CMO and I look at these almost as confidence layer, you know, if you take client ops, that gives you your client-focused department the confidence and ability to drive toward retention and growth.
Totally.
When you layer up to commercial ops, it gives your commercial organization that confidence and accountability to track forecast and what is actually happening is going to happen. And then that commercial enablement gives your commercial org the ability to stop being order takers and actually be strategists, really do that strategic thinking.
Totally true, Courtney. Yeah, so true. I could not agree more. And it's, we talk about being client centric and customer focused and all these buzzwords, but have we really operationalized that, right? Do we have systems, processes, and data that allow us to be that? And I would say no. By and large, very few B2B services organizations are truly client-centric, truly have the data that they need, the rigor and the discipline they need to deliver on that promise. You're totally right. So if we look at how you actually instill these disciplines in level 1 and 2, it's not magic. It boils down to 3 very simple things. I want to say something, though. Simple is not easy. And so what we're about to talk about, you're going to be like, of course, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And we've got to establish the rigor and the discipline around what we know is true once it's called out. If you have these, you have a system for revenue growth. If you don't, you'll continue to run the post-sale off of vibes. So requirement number 1 for each one of these levels is clear roles and responsibilities. You must have a clear owner of every single signal. Who is responsible for the renewal? Who owns the relationship health? You have to have people that you can hold accountable. And even more importantly, people that know they're empowered to pull the and/or on cord and say, it's time to stop. We got to look at this, to rally the organization, to drive forward, to fix problems, to drive growth. Requirement number 2, a disciplined meeting cadence. This is the heartbeat. It's what pumps blood through the organism. You show up at the same time every single week or month, and you drive the rhythm of the business. It's not ad hoc fire drills all the time. It's just steady, predictable drumbeat, getting ahead of problems, opening opportunities with rigor and discipline based on what the data says, not what you think or feel. Requirement number 3 fuels that data-driven decision-making. It's a regular reporting cadence. You need the data to fuel the meetings. This is the truth filter that allows for data-driven decision-making rather than managing by gut feel. Now, I want to share a little bit about what this data needs to give you insight into. Ultimately, the purpose of your client health, commercial health, isn't just about whether they're happy or not. It is about the propensity for that client relationship to sustain and grow over time. That's how you drive net revenue retention. And too often, an NPS score, a CSAT score, our health checks are just, are they happy? This isn't a happiness score, right? We want our clients to be happy, but what we care about is really driving retention and growth. And so we need to look at the tape. We need to look at the research to say, how does this actually happen? And the research is very, very clear. There are 3 core measures that are absolutely essential, but really hard to measure. The first one is that retention and growth is dependent on the perception of service quality. What's really, really important here is the word perception, right? It doesn't matter if our internal quality controls are saying we have incredible quality. If the perception of the client is that it's not strong, and we see this come out in the research all the time, incredibly high quality deliverables that are perceived low, churn. The exact opposite is true. You can actually have very low actual service quality, but if it's perceived to be high, it will be retained and it will grow. So you've got to manage that perception, which means you've got to measure that perception. So the number 1 thing is the perception of service quality. Number 2 is the strength of the interpersonal relationships. And the interpersonal relationships, not just at a buyer level, not just the executive sponsor, is the entire B2B team. Are they not just getting along, but can they collaboratively and cohesively work together to move the needle for the business? And the strength of that business relationship matters. And if you measure that and you're continually strengthening it, you're more likely to retain and to grow your accounts. And then finally is commercial alignment. Are you as a service provider seen as a strategic provider who's in the room, advising them, helping them see around corners? All of those types of things.
David, that is super helpful. And, I think so many times, sometimes there are pieces and parts of these things. But usually what I see is obviously people have meetings to talk about the health of but it's not a disciplined meeting cadence. It's not clear expectations or why we are here to have the kind of reporting that you're talking about to drive the business forward. So I'm curious, what does level 2 look like for this?
Yeah. So that is the basics that you just talked about. And I want to say one thing about that data. The data is what brings it alive. It's this objective reality that empowers us to have the disciplined meetings you're talking about, right? Yeah. You think about that pre-sales world where why is a pipeline review so productive? Because we have data that informs our discussion and fuels it. That's what we're going for, right? So let's go to that next level. Once you have those 3 things, you've got the roles, you have the meetings, you have the reports, right? That data happening inside your account management team. Then you move to level two, the commercial operations, right? So you're running the atomic account management, customer success team with that discipline. Now you're going to take that discipline and you're going to begin to influence the rest of the organization. This is a really big shift. Commercial ops is not an account management sport, it's a team sport, right? At this stage, we're taking those same three elements, the roles, the meetings, the reporting, that data-driven decision making, right? We take them to the entire organization evolved around our clients. In most firms, account management or customer success is an island. And here, the goal is to bring those same disciplines to the mainland, right? To integrate them in the same way that sales and marketing have been integrated over the years, right? Suddenly, your head of delivery, your CFO, your head of sales are all looking at that same data that's coming out of this powerful client engine, right? And that same reporting cadence is fueling and advising the way they're operating. They're attending a very similar rhythm of meetings and taking the exhaust of those meetings to influence their operations and vice versa. When delivery sees that something's slipping, sales knows that the renewal is at risk, right? When finance sees a delay in payment, we all know that there may be an issue that's going on, right? And it gets so much more complex than those simple examples. So now when we see a risk, the whole company swarms it. It's truly a team sport, right? It's influencing our forecasts, right? It's integrated into the business. And when we see an expansion opportunity, sales and delivery are already aligned on the solution before the client even asks. We're breaking down these silos. We're
Yeah.
sharing information and it's fueling our growth.
So what you're saying is this is where we finally fix the leaky bucket, which I'm sure everybody in sales and marketing can get behind. So when the entire organization is integrated into that client life cycle, nothing falls through the cracks because frankly, there's no cracks between departments anymore. You stop, losing revenue because one hand didn't know what the other hand was doing.
Yeah, and that would happen all the time, not because people are bad people, but I
Right.
remember when I was running Three Pillar, had 2,500 employees and, hundreds of clients that we were serving. And there was a gap in just understanding. And sales would say
Yeah.
one thing, delivery would say the opposite, account management was somewhere in the middle or had a totally different perspective. And my job became trying to understand and figure out who was more right than the others. And they were all trying to be right, but there was no
Right.
objective data. That's where we go back to this data. So for a long time, there's been a push for services firms to be more client centric, right? We recently did a podcast episode about why it's time to move towards what we call the account-based enterprise, right? We have account-based marketing. It's not just about marketing. It's about how do we have an account-based enterprise that's truly client-centric, where your world doesn't so much revolve around client centricity as it does around ensuring you have a healthy commercial relationship. Both ways, it's mutually beneficial between you and your clients. And applying this kind of commercial operations rigor is a massive step in that direction.
Okay, that's really helpful. Okay, so what's next after that, David?
Well, so we've built the operating foundation, right? And because you have the discipline of level one at the atomic account management, customer success level, and then you have the integration of level two, the business level, now you can finally move from defensive to offensive. Right? Most firms spend nearly all of their time defending their current footprint and trying to plug the holes in the leaky bucket, right? At level three, you're building proactive expansion plans. You're doing deep dive account planning based on real time objective data, not just year old aspirations, not just the gut feel of one person, right? You're no longer just trying to survive the next renewal. Now you're building a firm that grows 15 to 20% year over year just from its existing account base. Right? That's the magic. When you can get past 110%, 115%, 120% net revenue retention, that's where the fastest growing firms come from. That's how you scale predictably. You move from accidental growth to deliberate, system driven expansion. And that's the science, that's the machine we're trying to create.
Yeah. It really kind of feels like moving from being a vendor to being a partner for
I
your
love that.
clients. At this level, you're so aligned with the client's future that you
Totally.
become indispensable.
That's exactly right, Courtney. And it is this discipline, this rigor, and the data that informs it that allows you to actually do it. It's becoming indispensable. It is how you become company B. And to be indispensable, you have to understand the context you're in, operating in. You have to understand the perception of service quality. You have to understand the strength of your relationship, not based on how somebody feels, but based on the reality of what's going on and what that client is actually feeling. And that's where you drive world-class retention and expansion rates. So,
David, can I chime in here really quick? Because I have a
yeah.
question for you. I'm going to throw one in midway.
Okay.
Here close to the end, but maybe one you weren't expecting. You mentioned your time at Three Pillar, and
Mhm.
these people over here were saying this thing, these people were saying this. What has changed? Like, what has changed? Why didn't you have this back then?
Yeah. I mean, the really easy answer is artificial intelligence. We have come so far with being able to leverage natural language as an input, right?
Mhm.
Historically, customer analytics has all been about math algorithms on
Yeah.
top of transactional data. And in most B2B services firms, you don't actually have transactional data that is relevant to the perception of service quality, that
Right.
is relevant to the strength of interpersonal relationships, that is relevant to how aligned commercially your firms are. Those are unmeasurable things until we can actually take natural language and measure with it, right? And so this ability to infer, right? The inference engines that we now have are really, really powerful. And dare I say, are actually more rich with data than any of the data that we ever had because it is a representation of real life, not an abstraction into a transaction.
That's awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. It's just really helpful, I think, for everybody listening to kind of understand what has changed to bring
Yeah,
us where we can actually do this today. And if you're actually still filling out a spreadsheet, don't feel bad.
that's right.
Where the world has been up until this point in the last few years.
Well, speaking about replacing spreadsheets, Courtney, the next part of this webinar is actually your brainchild. And so I'd love to hand it over you to talk about our giveaway.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so the good news is everybody who attended today's webinar is eligible to win, but to protect everybody's privacy, we're actually going to follow up with a randomly chosen winner after today's session to get your Aura ring size that you would like and mailing address and all that good stuff so you can join David and I and our exclusive Aura Ring Club. Now, you might be wondering why a B2B RevOps webinar is giving away a piece of health tech. Besides that, it's awesome. It's actually because there is a perfect parallel between what Aura Ring does for us as individuals, our bodies, and what Knownwell does for your business. So here's the corollary. Most of us only realize we are sick once after our immune system gets really run down and we have a fever or we just like can't move. Okay. Think of your handy digital thermometer as RevOps Lite. It identifies the symptom after you already have a problem. The Aura Ring works differently. It actually monitors your body's hidden data, signals you can't actually feel yet, like heart rate variability or respiratory rate, to tell you that you're having symptoms before you even realize you're sick. It's incredible. I promise it does it. That's exactly what we at Knownwell are doing with Commercial Insights. We are tracking those biometrics of your accounts. We help you uncover that hidden data buried in the tone of your emails and call transcriptions. We really decipher the actual strength of your relationship through your client organization, and we help you identify the degree of commercial alignment you have with your clients to ensure that not only they don't only remain your clients, but they continue to grow. So our goal is to help you spot a fever in your account months before they ever send a cancellation notice, giving you time. You need to actually do something about it. We also help you see when times are great and accounts are in perfect health, how you can capitalize on those growth opportunities that otherwise might slip past you. So, David, what do you think? Does this mean we're like doctors for the revenue machine?
Maybe not doctors, Courtney, but we're certainly providing the MRI, right? In a services firm, you can't afford to wait for the fever to announce itself, right? By then, it's too late. You need to see the warning signals before the client even feels it.
Okay, David, we are out of time. So we actually, I overpromised your Q&A ability, but I would love for anybody that has questions for either of us, please send us a message on LinkedIn. We are both there and available to answer any questions you might have. Thanks to everybody who joined us, and be sure to keep an eye out on your inbox for any follow-ups from today's session. We'll be again sending around the recording of the webinar and the slides. So those will be coming your way very soon. Please feel free to share those with people that you know might be interested in this topic. We are starting to gather people that are interested in actually helping lead this transition into this next era of pulling that pre-sales rigor, that data, those cadences into the post-sales world. If you're one of those people that are interested, please follow up with us. We'd love to put you in a special group and continue to send you information like this. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, David. We'll see you next time.